An old man shuffled into the bank, his tattered sack slung over his shoulder. No one paid him any attention until he uttered 7 words that made the entire room go silent. "I own this bank. Prove me wrong." The polished floors of Chase Bank gleamed under the warm afternoon light. It was just another routine day, tellers typing away at their computers, customers waiting impatiently in line, and the ever-watchful branch manager, Scott Dawson, standing near his office door, ensuring everything ran smoothly. Then, the front doors swung open. An old man stepped inside. His presence was barely noticed at first. His coat was ragged, his shoes scuffed, and over his shoulder, he carried a worn-out burlap sack that looked like it had seen better days. He moved with a slow, deliberate gait, his eyes scanning the bank like he had been here before. Most customers ignored him, assuming he was just another struggling pensioner, looking to withdraw his last few bills. The employees, however, exchanged glances of mild annoyance. Chase Bank had a strict image to maintain, polished, professional, and wealthy. And this man, he was the exact opposite. As he approached the front counter, a young teller named Rachel forced a tight smile. "Sir, how can I help you today?" The old man gave her a kind nod. "I'd like to speak with the person in charge." Rachel hesitated, glancing towards Scott, who had been watching from his office. Scott, a man in his late 40s with slicked back hair and a designer watch that he made sure everyone noticed, sighed before making his way over. He didn't like distractions, especially not from someone who looked like they had no business being. In a high-end bank like his, Scott plastered on a condescending smile. "Sir, if you're looking for a loan or assistance, I can have someone—" "I own this bank." The words were spoken softly, but they hit the room like a thunderclap. The chatter among customers died instantly. A few tellers stopped what they were doing. Even the security guard shifted uneasily. Scott blinked, certain he had misheard. "I'm sorry. What did you just say?" The old man took a step forward, resting a wrinkled hand on the counter. His voice was calm, but firm. "I said, I own this bank." Then he dropped the burlap sack onto the counter with a dull thud. Scott chuckled under his breath. "Sir, I don't know what kind of joke this is, but I can assure you, Chase Bank is owned by corporate investors. Now, if you don't have actual business here, I'll have to ask you to leave." The old man smiled faintly. "Go ahead. Look up the ownership records." Scott's smirk wavered slightly, but his pride wouldn't let him back down. With an exaggerated sigh, he gestured for Rachel to pull up the bank's corporate database. "Fine. Since you insist, let's settle this." Rachel hesitated, but did as she was told. Her fingers clicked across the keyboard as she accessed the database. And then, the color drained from her face. Scott noticed her hesitation. "Well, tell the gentleman he's mistaken, so we can move on." Rachel swallowed hard. "Sir, the primary shareholder, the majority owner of Chase Bank, is a Mr. Walter Hughes." Scott rolled his eyes. "Exactly. Mr. Hughes is a billionaire investor. He lives in—" Rachel's voice wavered. "Sir, his full name is Walter Hughes Carter." A heavy silence fell over the room. Slowly, every set of eyes turned toward the old man. Walter smiled. Surprised, Scott's face twitched. This has to be a mistake. That's impossible. Mr. Hughes." Walter lifted a trembling hand and pulled out an old leather wallet. With precise movements, he retrieved a sleek, well-worn ID card and slid it across the counter. The name was clear as day, Walter Hughes Carter, and beneath it, in bold letters, Chairman and Founder, Chase Bank. Rachel's breath hitched. A few customers gasped. Even the security guard shifted uncomfortably, no longer sure if he should be standing near Scott or Walter. Scott's smug confidence began to crack. "That doesn't—" Walter turned his attention to the sack he had placed on the counter. With a slow, deliberate motion, he untied the top and pulled it open. Stacks of crisp, bundled $100 bills spilled out. Gasps filled the air. A few tellers' jaws nearly hit the floor. Walter patted the sack lightly. I founded this bank over 50 years ago with nothing but an idea and my life savings. I built it from the ground up. But when I stepped away from the business, I wanted to see if the values I instilled in this place were still alive. His eyes darkened. And, judging by what I've seen so far, I don't like what this bank has become. The tension inside Chase Bank was thick enough to cut with a knife. Every single employee, from the tellers to the security guard, stood frozen in stunned silence. The old man with the burlap sack, the man they had just mocked, was none other than Walter Hughes Carter, the founder and majority owner of the very bank they worked for. Branch manager Scott Dawson swallowed hard, his mind racing. He had been managing this branch for nearly a decade, and in all those years, he had never imagined coming face to face with the man who built it all. Scott forced a chuckle, attempting to regain control of the situation. "Mr. Carter, if this is really you, I want to personally welcome you to the branch. What an honor it is." Walter raised a hand, cutting him off. "Don't patronize me, Scott. I've been standing in this lobby for the past 30 minutes, observing everything. Do you know what I saw?" Scott's mouth opened, but no words came out. Walter turned to face the staff. His voice was calm, but there was a sharp edge to it. "I saw tellers rushing customers out the door instead of taking time to help them. I saw a single mother asking for assistance with an overdraft fee, only to be dismissed like she was a nuisance. And then, I saw you, Scott." The branch manager stiffened. Walter folded his arms. "You were too busy adjusting your Rolex and barking orders to notice me. And when I came to you as a regular customer, you belittled me. You assumed I was worthless." A few of the tellers glanced at each other uncomfortably. Some of them had been here long enough to know that Scott ran the branch with an iron fist, only caring about performance metrics, profit margins, and his own reputation. Scott cleared his throat, his voice forced and uneasy. "Sir, I had no idea it was you. If I had known, I would have—" Walter slammed his palm on the counter, making Rachel and a few others jump. "That's the problem, Scott. You only care about people when you know they have power." Scott's face burned red, but he couldn't argue. Walter sighed, rubbing his temple before turning to Rachel. "How long have you worked here, dear?" Rachel hesitated before answering. "Almost 3 years, sir. And in those 3 years, has anyone in management, especially Scott, ever asked you about your career goals, about how they can support your growth?" Rachel looked down. "No, sir." Walter clenched his jaw. "I thought so." He then turned to the security guard. "What about you, son?" The guard, a young man in his 20s named Luis, looked caught off guard. I just work here to pay my bills, sir. Management doesn't really acknowledge me." Walter exhaled through his nose, shaking his head. Unacceptable. The entire room had gone eerily silent. No one dared to move. Then Walter reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a folded letter. He carefully unfolded it and smoothed it out against the counter. "This is a formal ownership directive. Effective immediately, I will be personally investigating the operations of this branch." Scott's face turned ghostly pale. What?" Walter locked eyes with him. "I want to see how this bank really runs, without the PR speeches and corporate nonsense. And Scott, if I find anything unethical, you and I are going to have a very serious conversation." Scott swallowed hard. Walter turned to the employees. "For the next few days, I will not be your CEO. I will be one of you. I will work side by side with the tellers. I will assist customers. And I will see firsthand what's broken in this bank." Rachel's eyes widened. Louise shifted uncomfortably. Even some of the customers still lingering near the entrance were whispering among themselves. Scott, however, couldn't hold back his panic. "Sir, that's unnecessary. We can give you reports, show you data." Walter cut him off with a cold stare. "I don't trust reports, Scott. I trust people. and I'm about to find out which ones are worth trusting in this branch. Scott clenched his fists, his lips pressing into a thin line. He had spent years climbing the corporate ladder, proving his worth, making this branch one of the top-performing locations in the city. And now, all of that was about to be put under a microscope by a man who had been absent for years. Walter gave one final glance around the room. "I'll be back tomorrow morning, bright and early, ready to work. I suggest all of you do the same." With that, he grabbed his burlap sack, turned on his heel, and strode out of the bank. The moment the doors closed behind him, Scott finally exhaled. His hands trembled as he wiped sweat from his forehead. For the first time in his career, he wasn't the most powerful man in the room, and that terrified him. The next morning, Walter Hughes Carter arrived at Chase Bank at exactly 7:55 a.m., 5 minutes before opening. But this time, he wasn't dressed as a wealthy CEO. Instead, he wore a simple blue button-up, slacks, and a name tag that simply read, "Walt, Teller in Training." The employees didn't know whether to treat him as a superior or a newcomer, so most avoided eye contact. Only Rachel, the young teller who had shown kindness the previous day, gave him a small nod. Manager Scott Dawson was already in his office, peeking out through the blinds. He had barely slept, paranoid about what Walter might discover. At exactly 8 a.m., the doors opened and the first wave of customers entered. Walter positioned himself at Rachel's counter, observing her movements. She worked quickly, but genuinely cared about each person she helped, greeting them with warmth and patience. Walter leaned in. "Rachel, how often do you get breaks?" She hesitated before answering. 15 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes for lunch, and 15 in the afternoon. If we're not too busy." Walter frowned. "And how often are you too busy?" Rachel sighed. "Almost every day." Walter's jaw tightened. He had read the bank's policies. Employees were supposed to get their full breaks. But in reality, the workload was so intense that tellers were skipping meals just to keep up. A few customers down the line, an elderly woman named Mrs. Patterson was struggling to fill out a deposit slip. Walter immediately stepped forward. "Ma'am, do you need some help?" Mrs. Patterson smiled weakly. "Oh dear, these numbers are so small. My eyesight isn't what it used to be." Walter grabbed a pen. "Let me assist you." But before he could, Scott Dawson appeared out of nowhere. "We don't fill out slips for customers," he said sharply. Walter looked up, eyebrow raised. "Why not?" Scott forced a stiff smile, clearly trying to mask his growing irritation. "It's policy. We need to keep the lines moving. If we help one, we have to help all, and that slows us down." Walter locked eyes with him. "So we'd rather embarrass our elderly customers than take 30 seconds to assist them." Scott's face twitched, but he didn't answer. Walter shook his head and filled out the slip anyway, handing it back to Mrs. Patterson with a reassuring smile. "Here you go, Mum. No rush." Mrs. Patterson patted his hand. "Thank you, dear. You have a good heart." Scott turned on his heel and stormed back to his office. Throughout the morning, Walter continued his observations, and what he uncovered shocked him. Unrealistic sales goals. Employees were pressured to upsell credit cards and unnecessary services to customers, often without fully explaining the terms. Toxic management. Scott's leadership relied on fear. Employees were constantly reminded they were replaceable. Unethical loan practices. Walter overheard a conversation where a loan officer was pushing high-interest loans onto vulnerable customers, prioritizing quotas over financial well-being. At lunchtime, Walter slipped outside and made a phone call. "Brandon, it's me. I need you at the bank by 5 p.m. sharp." Brandon Carter, his son and co-owner of Carter Financial Holdings, didn't ask questions. "Got it, Dad." Walter hung up and exhaled. It was time to take action. That afternoon, a single mother named Lisa Hernandez entered the bank, her toddler clinging to her leg. She approached the counter with tears in her eyes. "Please, I just need a little help. My account overdrafted because my paycheck was delayed. I can pay the fee next week, I promise. Rachel bit her lip. I'll see what I can do. But before she could finish, Scott strode over. No exceptions. Rules are rules. Lisa looked heartbroken. But I just need a few days. Please, Scott scoffed. Maybe you should learn to manage your money better. Walter slammed his hand on the counter, making the entire bank go silent. That's enough. Scott blinked, caught off guard. Excuse me? Walter ripped off his name tag and straightened his posture. The disguise was over. I've seen everything I need to see. This branch is broken. And you, Scott, are at the heart of the problem. The entire bank fell into stunned silence. Scott stammered, looking around as if someone would save him. I was just following policy. Walter's voice was cold as steel. No, you were following your own greed, and now you're going to face the consequences. At that moment, the doors opened. In walked Brandon Carter, his son. And just like that, the walls around Scott's power began to crumble. The moment Brandon Carter stepped inside the Chase Bank branch, the energy in the room shifted. The once confident Scott Dawson went pale, realizing he was standing in front of not just an old man with a sack, but the co-owners of Carter Financial. Holdings gasps spread through the bank as employees and customers began whispering. Wait, is that the CEO? The guy who worked here yesterday? What's going on? Walter stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. Mr. Dawson, your actions have been unacceptable. The way you've treated employees, the way you've disrespected customers, and the toxic culture you've created. It all ends today. Scott forced a nervous laugh. Come on, Mr. Carter. Let's talk in private. No. Walter's voice was like steel. We'll talk here, where everyone can hear. Brandon pulled out his tablet, tapping the screen. Before we move forward, I want everyone here to understand what we've discovered. A projector screen in the corner of the bank lit up, displaying a list of issues Walter had uncovered. Employees skipping breaks due to workload pressure to sell financial products customers didn't need demeaning treatment. Of elderly and struggling clients. Loan officers pushing high-interest deals to meet quotas. Hostile management that ruled with fear. The employees sat frozen in their seats, terrified but also relieved, because for the first time, someone was actually listening. Scott clenched his fists. This isn't fair! You're making me look like the bad guy. Walter took a step closer. Because you are. Walter turned to the employees. For years, this branch has been run on intimidation. That ends today. He looked at Rachel, the teller who had been kind to customers despite the toxic work culture. Rachel, from this moment forward, you are promoted to branch manager. Your dedication and kindness are what this bank needs. Rachel gasped. Me? But I'm just a teller. Walter smiled. Not anymore. Scott's jaw dropped. Wait. What? Walter turned back to him, eyes cold. And you, Mr. Dawson, you're fired. Scott stumbled back, panic setting in. You can't do this. I've been here for years. You need me. Brandon sighed. Scott, we pulled your records before coming here. The number of HR complaints against you? Staggering. The turnover rate under your management? Embarrassing. The bank doesn't need you. It needs to recover from you. Security guards stepped forward. Scott's face twisted in fury. You'll regret this. Walter didn't even blink. I highly doubt it. Now leave. With no other choice, Scott stormed out, the doors swinging shut behind him. And just like that, the nightmare was over. With Scott gone, Walter turned to the employees. Effective immediately, things will change. Proper break schedules will be enforced. No more pressuring customers into financial traps. No more mistreatment of employees. And if anyone has concerns, my office is always open. The room fell silent for a moment. Then applause erupted. For the first time in years, the staff felt safe. Rachel wiped a tear from her eye. Thank you, Mr. Carter. Walter smiled. Just call me Walt." As Walter and Brandon walked toward the exit, a familiar voice called out, "Excuse me, sir." Walter turned to see Mrs. Patterson, the elderly woman he had helped the day before. She smiled warmly, reaching into her purse. "I never got to give you a tip for your kindness." She placed a $1 bill in Walter's hand. Walter looked at it for a moment, then chuckled. "Thank you, ma'am. But kindness doesn't need a price." As he stepped outside, he glanced up at the Chase Bank logo. His business had nearly forgotten the most important rule of all. People come first, but not anymore. And with that, he walked away, ready to rebuild what was broken. If you enjoyed this story, make sure to like, subscribe, and share. What would you have done in Walter's shoes? Let us know in the comments. Turn on notifications so you never miss an inspiring story.